All right, so today we're going to take a deep dive into the world of MAP sensors. That's a pretty important little gizmo.
Little gizmo, yeah.
That helps our cars run well.
Absolutely.
You know, it seems like there's a lot more to these sensors than meets the eye. So for those of us who aren't, mechanics or whatever,
Right.
what exactly does a MAP sensor do? Like, how would you describe it?
Think of it like a straw.
Okay.
You suck on a straw, you're creating lower pressure inside the straw compared to the outside.
Right.
The MAP sensor works in a similar way.
Okay.
But instead of the straw, it's measuring pressure changes.
Gotcha.
Inside your engine's intake manifold.
Okay.
It's constantly monitoring how much air is being sucked in.
So it's like sensing those pressure changes?
Yeah.
Then what?
That's where the magic happens.
Ooh, magic.
The MAP sensor, it converts those pressure readings into electrical signals.
Okay.
And then it sends them to the engine's control unit, or ECU for short.
Okay.
And that's basically the brains of your car's engine.
So the MAP sensor is like a pressure translator?
Exactly.
For the engine?
Yes.
Okay, so this pressure information, it's super important then.
It's critical.
Because the ECU uses it to determine the right balance of air and fuel for combustion in the engine.
Right. If you have too much fuel, you're wasting gas and polluting more.
Right.
Too little, and you risk damaging your engine.
So the MAP sensor is finding that sweet spot.
Precisely.
Okay, I'm starting to understand this.
It plays a really vital role
in
making sure your engine is running smoothly and efficiently.
This is where it gets interesting, right?
Yeah.
What happens when this little MAP sensor starts acting up? What kind of havoc?
Oh, it can cause a whole host of problems.
Okay.
Imagine your car sputtering, struggling to idle, guzzling gas like crazy.
I've been there.
That's what a faulty MAP sensor can lead to. And in some cases, it can even cause your car to just suddenly lose power while you're driving.
Wow.
Which can be pretty scary.
Yeah, I can imagine.
You don't want that to happen.
No.
Not at all.
So from the sources that you've been looking at, what are some of the usual suspects behind a bad MAP sensor?
So sometimes the sensor itself
it
just wears out over time.
Okay.
It's constantly exposed to heat, vibration, all sorts of gunk under the hood,
Right.
dirt, oil buildup, even a little moisture can cause it to malfunction.
So it's like anything else on a car eventually.
Yeah.
It just needs replacing.
Exactly.
Oh.
Another common culprit is vacuum leaks
Okay.
in the intake manifold. So imagine the intake manifold as a network of pipes carrying air to your engine.
Okay.
If there's a crack in one of those pipes or a loose hose, it messes up those pressure readings.
So the MAP sensor is getting inaccurate information.
It throws off that delicate balance of air and fuel.
Right.
The ECU might think there's more air coming in
Okay.
than there actually is.
Gotcha.
And so it might inject too much fuel,
Makes sense.
leading to poor fuel economy.
Yeah.
And potentially even damaging the engine over time.
Right.
You don't want that.
No.
Definitely not.
Are there any other issues that we should be aware of?
Sure, sometimes it's not the sensor itself or a vacuum leak, but the wiring
Okay.
connecting the MAP sensor to the ECU.
Okay.
Corrosion, fraying, or a loose connection can disrupt those signals being sent back and forth. And in very rare cases, it could be the ECU itself
Okay.
having trouble interpreting the signals.
Interesting.
Yeah, it's kind of like a miscommunication
Gotcha.
between the brain and the lungs, so to speak.
Okay, so let's say my car is acting up, showing some of their symptoms.
Yeah.
How do I know if it's really the MAP sensor?
Right.
That's the problem.
Well, there are a few ways to check. The sources that you provided have some great step-by-step instructions
Okay.
on how to troubleshoot a MAP sensor.
So what's the first thing I should do?
Well, the first step
Yeah.
is to pop the hood
Okay.
and give the MAP sensor and its connections a good look over.
Okay.
Are there any obvious signs of damage,
Okay.
like cracks or loose wires?
Gotcha.
Any hoses that look loose or disconnected?
All right, so we're starting with a visual inspection. What's next?
If everything looks okay visually, then it's time to break out the multimeter,
Okay.
which is a handy tool for checking electrical circuits.
Okay.
You want to check the voltage readings coming from the sensor.
Voltage readings, explain this like I'm 5.
Okay, so imagine the reference voltage as a baseline,
Okay.
like a steady heartbeat. It's usually around 5 volts
Okay.
and tells you the sensor's getting power.
Okay, I see.
The signal voltage is more dynamic.
All right.
It fluctuates based on those pressure changes
Okay.
in the intake manifold, kind of like how your pulse quickens when you exercise.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
These voltage readings can tell us a lot then.
Absolutely. If the reference voltage is off, it could mean there's a wiring problem.
Okay.
And if the signal voltage isn't changing appropriately as you rev the engine, it could indicate a problem with the sensor itself.
That makes sense. I noticed the sources mentioned something called a continuity test.
Ah, yes.
What's that all about?
So a continuity test, it's basically like making sure the wires connecting your MAP sensor to the ECU are a clear pathway. So you use the multimeter to check if the electrical signal can travel uninterrupted from the sensor to the ECU.
I see.
If there's no continuity, it could mean a broken wire somewhere.
Okay.
Like a clogged artery.
Right.
Preventing blood flow.
Interesting.
Yeah.
So we've got the visual check, the voltage test, continuity test. We're really getting a thorough checkup here.
Exactly. And there's one more clue.
Ooh, one more.
We can look for. Trouble codes.
Trouble codes.
Yeah. Think of them as your car trying to talk to you.
Oh, okay.
Sending you secret messages about what's wrong.
All right. So what are those exactly?
Imagine your car's dashboard.
Yeah.
Lighting up with a code like P0106.
Yeah.
That's a trouble code.
Gotcha.
Each code corresponds to a specific problem.
Okay.
Within the engine management system.
So how do we tap into the secret language of trouble codes?
Well, you're going to need an OBD2 scanner.
Okay.
Which is a small device that plugs into your car's computer system and reads out these codes.
Interesting.
Think of it as a universal translator for your car's secret language.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. So if our MAP sensor is acting up, what kind of code might we see?
One common one is P0106.
Okay.
And it's basically saying, hey, there's something fishy with the MAP sensor.
Okay.
The pressure readings just aren't making sense. It could mean the readings are outside the expected range. Or that the sensor isn't responding properly to changes in pressure.
So P0106 is kind of a general
alarm bell.
Alarm bell.
Yeah.
But we need more information.
Got to investigate further.
Okay.
To pinpoint the exact issue.
Are there any other codes we should be on the lookout for?
The sources also mention a few others.
Okay.
Like P0107, P0108, and P0109.
Right.
Each pointing to a slightly different issue with the MAP sensor.
Okay.
P0107 means the signal voltage is too low.
Okay.
Possibly indicating a vacuum leak.
Okay.
P0108 means it's too high.
Gotcha.
Maybe a blockage in the vacuum hose. And P0109 means the readings are all over the place.
Yeah.
Suggesting an intermittent problem.
Intermittent.
A loose connection or a failing sensor.
So it's amazing how much information can be packed into these little codes.
It really is.
So it's like each one tells a different story.
It's like having a direct line to your car's thoughts.
Yeah.
But you need to know the language to understand what it's saying.
Right. Exactly.
That's the key.
All right. So let's say we've done all our checks. We've consulted our OBD2 scanner.
Right.
And we've got a confirmed MAP sensor issue. What are our options for fixing it?
Well, that depends on what the problem is.
Okay.
But we can delve into that in the next part of our deep dive.
Stay tuned.
Stay tuned.
We'll be right back.
We'll be right back.
Welcome back. So we've got a better idea now of how these MAP sensors work.
Yeah.
And some ways to diagnose if there's a problem. But let's talk about how to actually fix those issues.
Yeah, get down to business.
Yeah, let's get into it.
All right.
So I guess the most common fix is probably just replacing the MAP sensor itself.
Yeah, that's usually the first step.
How complicated of a job is that?
It's usually pretty straightforward.
Okay.
Compared to some other car repairs, for sure.
Okay.
The sources you provided.
Yeah.
Actually have some very detailed instructions on how to do it.
Okay, great.
So if you're brave enough to tackle this as a DIY project, what's the general game plan?
Yeah, what do we do?
First things first. Safety.
Oh.
Always disconnect the negative terminal of your battery before you start doing anything under the hood.
Yeah, that's good advice.
We don't want any accidental sparks.
No.
What's next?
All right, so next you'll need to find the MAP sensor.
Okay.
It's typically mounted somewhere on or near the intake manifold.
Right.
If you can't find it.
Yeah.
Your car's service manual is your best friend.
Gotcha.
All right, once you found it, you'll carefully disconnect the electrical connector.
Oh.
And then you can unscrew or unclip the sensor itself.
Okay.
It's usually held in place with a couple of screws or just a simple clip.
Okay, so sounds pretty straightforward.
Yeah.
So then to install the new sensor, we just do the same thing in reverse, pretty much.
Okay.
Make sure the new sensor is aligned and seated properly.
Okay.
Then you just reattach those screws or clips.
Okay.
Plug that electrical connector back in.
Right.
Reconnect your battery.
Yeah.
You should be good to go.
Wow. That does sound pretty manageable.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes the problem isn't the sensor itself, though, right?
Right.
Sometimes it's the wiring.
The wiring, yeah.
So what do we do if we find a wiring issue?
Well, that's where things can get a little trickier.
Okay.
If the continuity test showed a break in the wiring,
Yeah.
or if you saw any corrosion or fraying, you'll need to address that.
Okay.
You might be able to repair a small section of damaged wire with some electrical tape.
Okay.
Sometimes it's best to just replace the entire wiring harness
I see.
that connects to the MAP sensor.
So I imagine that's probably a little more involved
It definitely can be.
than just swapping out the sensor, right?
Yeah, the complexity really depends on your car and how accessible the wiring is.
Okay.
Some cars make it easier than others.
Right.
Your service manual will be helpful.
Yeah.
And you can probably find some helpful videos online, too,
Right.
showing the process.
Makes sense.
It's always good to do your research.
Yeah. Better to be prepared
Exactly.
than end up with a bigger mess.
Absolutely.
Let's talk about vacuum leaks.
Vacuum leaks, yes.
So, those cracks or loose hoses in the intake manifold,
Yeah.
tracking those down can be a challenge.
It can be. It's kind of like detective work.
Where do we even start?
Well, you start by inspecting all the hoses and connections around the intake manifold,
Okay.
looking for any obvious cracks,
Mm-hmm.
loose clamps,
Yeah.
signs of wear and tear.
Yeah.
Even a small crack can create a leak.
Okay.
And a little trick
Yeah?
mechanics use is to spray a little bit of carb cleaner
Oh,
around those areas
Mm-hmm.
while the engine's running.
All right.
If the engine speed changes, you've probably found your leak.
That's a good trick.
Yeah.
So once we find it, what's the fix?
Well, it depends on the leak.
Okay.
Sometimes it's as simple as tightening a loose clamp
Okay.
or replacing a damaged hose.
Right.
Other times you might need to replace a gasket or a seal.
I see.
Again, your service manual is your best friend here.
Right.
And there are a lot of good resources online
Yeah.
that can guide you through that process.
Okay, so it seems like there are solutions for every problem.
Pretty much.
But what happens if you replace the MAP sensor,
Yeah.
but the trouble code keeps coming back?
Oh, that can be frustrating.
Yeah.
But it means there's something else going on.
Oh.
Maybe a hidden vacuum leak you missed, or a lingering wiring issue,
I see.
or even an issue with the ECU itself. But that's less common.
Okay.
It's like treating the symptoms,
Yeah.
but not the underlying cause.
So we've got to go back to the drawing board.
Exactly.
Do some more detective work.
Do some more detective work.
The sources you shared mentioned some things to check if the code comes back.
Yeah, go back and check for those vacuum leaks again.
Right.
Really scrutinize everything.
Okay.
Reinspect the wiring. Maybe even test the bare RO sensor,
Okay.
which works along with the MAP sensor to measure atmospheric pressure.
So diagnosing these car problems, it's all about being methodical and eliminating possibilities.
You got it.
Man, I've learned so much about MAP sensors today.
Yeah, they're pretty cool little devices.
Yeah, I never realized they were so important for the overall health of the engine.
They really are unsung heroes.
That's a good way to put it.
Yeah.
All right, well, let's take a quick break.
Okay.
And then when we come back, we'll wrap up this MAP sensor deep dive.
Sounds good.
And we're back. All right, so before we finish up our MAP sensor deep dive, I want to go back to those trouble codes.
Yeah.
They're like a secret decoder ring for understanding what's wrong with our cars. We talked about a few of them, like P0106, which kind of indicates a general problem with the MAP sensor readings.
Right.
But what are some nuances of that code that we should know about?
Well, remember how we said that the MAP sensor has to stay
Yeah.
within a certain range of pressure readings? So P0106 could mean the signal is too high or too low,
Okay.
or that the sensor isn't responding properly to changes in pressure.
I see.
So that's why it's so important to do those voltage tests
Right.
with the multimeter
Okay.
to figure out what's really going on.
So P0106, it's kind of a general alarm?
Yeah, it's like a general alarm bell.
Okay.
But then we need to do some more investigating to
Yeah.
figure out what the exact issue is.
Then there's P0107 and P0108.
Yeah, those are a little more specific.
Okay, what do those mean?
So P0107 means the voltage is too low,
Okay.
and that usually points to a vacuum leak.
Right, right.
Think of it like a whisper instead of a
Oh.
normal voice.
I like that.
The signal is weak
Okay.
because there's a loss of pressure.
That makes sense.
What about P0108?
Yeah, so that one means the signal is too high.
Yeah, I mean, the voltage is too high.
Okay.
So that could be a blockage in a vacuum hose, maybe even a problem with the wiring.
Okay.
Like someone shouting instead of speaking normally.
Okay, so it's too strong of a signal.
Yeah, exactly.
So we got P0107, whisper, vacuum leak.
Yep.
P0108, shouting, blockage.
You got it.
Okay.
Now, P0109, that one's a little more tricky.
Yeah, what about that one?
So that indicates intermittent readings.
Yeah.
Meaning the MAP sensor is sending these erratic signals.
Oh.
That's like someone talking in a normal voice.
Yeah.
And then they start mumbling.
Right.
You don't know what's going to happen.
So unpredictable.
Yeah, very unpredictable.
What causes those types of signals?
Well, it could be a loose connection, a damaged wire that's only making contact sometimes.
Right.
Or even just a failing sensor that's on its last legs.
So how do we even begin to track down a problem that's so inconsistent?
Well, you got to be patient.
Okay.
Got to be persistent. Double check all the wiring, all the connections.
Yeah.
See if anything changes.
Okay.
You might even have to drive around with your OBD2 scanner connected.
Right.
Hoping to catch that sensor.
Yeah.
Acting up in real time.
Oh, man.
It's a challenge sometimes.
But you know, these trouble codes, they're really important. They can help us fix our cars.
It's like having a superpower.
Yeah.
To understand what your car is trying to tell you.
Well, I feel like I've gotten a crash course.
I think so.
In MAP sensors today.
Yeah.
Really learned a lot.
Good.
You know, from how they function to how to troubleshoot them.
Yep.
You're well on your way.
You're going to be an expert.
Yeah.
In no time.
To becoming a MAPT sensor expert.
Absolutely.
All right. Well, thanks for joining us.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
For this deep dive into the world of MAP sensors.
It's been fun.
Until next time, happy driving.
Happy driving.